Hello, everyone. We'll give just a minute for everybody to join before we get started. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Link Center today for this shared learning group focused on the topic of how relationships influence development and sense of self. I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items while we get started today. The session is being recorded, and the recording and the transcript will be made available on our website. We welcome you to revisit that content yourself and to share it with others. Attendees cannot see the names of other attendees, and all attendees are muted. Please use the chat function in Zoom to communicate with other people and host during the webinar. You can use the chat by clicking on Chat at the bottom of your screen. Please be aware that your name will appear in the chat if you make a comment, and you can change your display name by clicking on those three little dots next to your name and selecting Rename. We will have representatives from the Link Center watching the chat and responding throughout the session today. And if you'd like to submit a question or comment privately to the host and panelist, you can do that in the chat or by clicking on the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We have live captioning and ASL interpreters present today, and we'll be spotlighting the active speaker and the ASL interpreter throughout the webinar. If you click on View on your Zoom screen, you can change the way you see the panelists and the speakers. And if you're having any trouble with your view, you can let us know that in the chat, and we will try to help. So at this time, I'm going to hand the floor over to Dr. Stacy Nonamaker, who's going to start today's presentation. Stacy, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Stephanie, and hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're joining us from. Wherever that is, we're so grateful to have you. As Stephanie said, this shared learning group is hosted by the Link Center, and we're really looking to improve access to mental health services for people with disabilities. We felt that today's topic, from childhood to community, how relationships influence development and sense of self, was really important to that mission. I am with the National Association of State Directors of Developmental Disability Services, or NASDs, which leads the Link Center work along with many other partners, some of them whom you will hear from today. We also are guided and led by a steering committee. We have 14 people nationwide with varied lived experience who guide and direct our work. And we're very excited to have a steering committee member with us today. So that with that, I'm not sure how many of you have joined us for shared learning groups before, or how many of you are new to joining us. Welcome to all. But hopefully you have heard about the Link Center website. Perhaps you have visited the Link Center website. You may have even found some resources or information on our website that is helpful to you. We do always say, if you haven't checked us out, check us out, and you can use that QR code on your screen. You can use the link on your screen, or Stephanie will also put the link in the chat for easy access. But we say check us out and check back often because we're constantly putting more information, more resources to support the mission of improving mental health access for people with co-occurring conditions. So that's a little bit about us and who we are as the Link Center who's hosting our gathering today. We wanted to just take a moment, invite you all to introduce yourselves in the chat. So if you want to just say hello, who you are, maybe where you're from, that's always fun to see where people are joining us from. And you know, what your role is, or if you have any organizations or affiliations. We always love to know who's joining us and from where you're joining us. A couple of things about our shared learning groups. Every quarter, we host 4 meetings, one for direct support professionals, one for clinical professionals, and we hosted those yesterday. Today, we're hosting one. This one is for families. And then later on today, we're also hosting a shared learning group for people with lived experience. The topic and the information in all 4 of the sessions are the same, but we do tweak some of the content, some of the talking points a little bit, uh, so that it's targeted for the different audiences that we're speaking to. This presentation and the content that you'll see today is a collaboration among Link Center partners. That includes people with lived experience, researchers, and people who work on policy issues. As I said, you'll meet some of them today. And as Stephanie already mentioned, we will record and transcribe today's meeting. So the materials will be available after the meeting, and we encourage you to share those materials with other people that you think would find it interesting, that would benefit from the things that we talk about today, or that who also may be in a place that they can share with others. We're really trying to build a community by driving people to our website, sharing the things that we put out there, resources, information, because we know it takes a village, and that this work, is ambitious work. And we, invite everybody, anybody who's also thinking about this, who's also involved in how we can better support people with co-occurring conditions to be part of that community. So we have a couple goals and outcomes we'd like to achieve today. The first is that we, as the Link Center, are going to share with you the things that we are doing, the things that we are thinking about when we think about how relationships influence the development and sense of self. Hopefully, we're going to impress upon you the impact that relationships have on our lives. We're going to share some resources and information related to relationships. And then we're going to turn the tables a little bit, really focus on that shared part of the shared learning groups, and invite you all to help us solve an example situation after you hear from our partners about what we're thinking, just so that we can hear how you think about this topic. And also inviting you to share any information, any resources that you have on this topic. Here at the Link Center, we're in a really unique position and a great position to be able to elevate all the good stuff that is out there, put it up on our website for other people to access and learn from. But if we don't know it's out there, right, we don't have access to that. And we know that there is a lot out there that people have at their fingertips by way of resources and information. So as I mentioned, we do have a steering committee, and we're incredibly grateful and indebted to this group of folks who show up, who share their experience, who tell their stories, and they also help us determine what topics are most relevant to share during these shared learning groups. They help us develop the content for these topics and the shared learning groups. And one of the things that we established early on with our steering committee were some agreements for our time together during these shared learning groups so that we can all benefit from this experience. I'm going to share those agreements with you now. The first is take care of yourself, do what is necessary for your comfort and care. We should be gentle with ourselves and each other because this work is hard to do. Next, we celebrate that we are all individuals from different backgrounds. We celebrate that we have shared experiences to learn from, and we know that we are each unique with our own experiences in the world. And finally, we want to create the space where we listen and share with open minds and with kindness, and we do not judge or blame others for what we share. We're all here to learn from one another. We are all here to share what we want and what we're willing to share. Again, all towards that aim of how can we better support people with co-occurring conditions, and how can we increase access to mental health services and supports for folks. So before I turn it over to our presenters for today, just to prime the topic a little bit more, get us thinking about relationships. I know that in just seeing that you all are putting your introductions in the chat, we have people who wear different hats. I think we can say most of you who are joining today, we could say are supporters, right? We support people. But I'd like you to take that hat off for a moment and just think about yourself and think about some relationships that you have that are meaningful and important to you. And I'd like you to take a moment and in the chat, if you would, if it's just a word or a few words, let us know what things are important to you in a relationship. Trust, respect, trust and safety, being able to be myself, honesty, trust, openness, connection, support, empathy. These are wonderful, and thank you, everyone. You can keep them coming if you have some more thoughts. We're in such a unique position that we have these conversations across different audiences, so it's fun to compare, right, what different audiences say. And I will say that there has been some great consistency in things that people are identifying or noting are important in relationships. And thus far, across all the shared learning groups, the very first one that pops up and pops up the most has been trust. So we hear you loud and clear, and that really resonates with us and will probably resonate with the content that we're here to present to you today. And so now I am extremely honored to be able to introduce you all to Victoria Villalobos Guerrero, who is one of our steering committee members and is here to set the stage a little bit more on why we thought it was important for us to be talking about relationships. So Victoria, I'll turn it over to you.
Hello, I'm Victoria Villalobos Gallardo. I am a steering committee member. I am a person with autism and many other mental health issues such as depression, mild psychosis, anxiety. So I have a lot to say about this. Next slide. So what do we mean by relationships? So from the moment we're born, every single human will form all different kinds of relationships throughout their life. These can be parental, mothers, fathers, familial, uncles, aunts, cousins, some friends, romantic, and professional, which is mostly care providers. Next slide. So why are relationships important? It's because each relationship has a different level of comfort and trust. There are some things that you may be willing to share with your friends that you are uncomfortable talking about a parent for. This can be something like romantic problems or sex life. These things are things you don't really want to talk to with your parents, but that you might be okay talking with to a friend or romantic partner. Likewise, there are types of support that you can only get from a care provider, not friends and family. As friends and family of people with these problems, you really do want to help as much as possible. But there are some cases where it doesn't matter how much you give, that they do need professional help. And that's very important to have a variety of relationships to fulfill all these different needs. Next slide. So how do different types of relationships impact who we are and who we become? So, as humans, we are born as blank slates. Every single interaction in our lives contributes to the people that we are today. Children, especially, are in a critical developmental period where every interaction molds who they are. Everyone here has probably had a childhood experience, anything from something mundane to something extreme, but you remember these things from childhood because this is a critical developmental period and you're soaking in all these interactions in order to learn about the world. So, these interactions shape your views on how different relation types work. Next slide. So when a kid is fed positive relationships, it'll leave them feeling safe, comfortable, and confident with who they are as people. If they feel safe with their relationships, then they will never doubt themselves. They always know that they can go to someone for help, and it generally helps them be a more well-rounded person. But when a child is fed negative relationships, they become scared, insecure, and withdrawn. These interactions basically shape who you are as adults. If a child was punished for every negative emotion felt, they may never want to share how they truly feel and they hold back a lot of important information that could help. If a child was taught every time I'm upset, I get in trouble, then they're not going to tell you when they're upset and stuff like that. Next slide. So, why is it important to nurture relationships for people with co-occurring or multiple needs? So people with dual diagnoses are just like you in these senses, but the relationships they carry hold a deeper effect, which is much harder to alter once the views are there. This is mostly due to the developmental disability part, the autism, and it's very hard to repair a broken relationship once it happens. Someone can have a lifetime of positive, happy things, but it only takes one bad relationship to completely alter the way they feel about themselves and how they feel about relationships as a whole. I'm going to tell a story about myself when I was in the mental hospital. My mom and I did not always have the best relationship, and I was in the mental hospital for suicidal ideation. And at some point, I did have to be sedated. And I remember very clearly being in my room, just laying on my back, completely out of it. I was scared, sad, lonely. I had never felt more lonely at that moment than I had in my entire life. And I guess visitor hour came around. They asked my mother, "Do you still want to visit her? She's sedated, though." My mom said yes. And we didn't really say much to each other because we weren't on the best terms. But I do remember that I was scared. So she held me and hugged me, told me it was going to be okay. She started telling me bedtime stories from my childhood to calm me down. And I fell asleep feeling safe and secure, which is very, very hard to feel in a mental hospital when you're so surrounded by all this terrifying negativity. So because of that, it is possible to heal a tainted view after a bad relationship. It just takes a significant amount of time, trust, and effort. It's better to just prevent that negative relationship from ever happening. My mom and I, we definitely got better. She's my closest person now, my closest confidant. And I truly believe that she put in the work to make sure that I felt safe, trusted, and protected with her. So that's extremely important. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for sharing. And I know that we didn't talk about this earlier, but before we turn it over to Nancy and Kelly, I'm wondering, since I noticed in the chat we have many supporters also here, and I know that yesterday you told a story about a situation with a nurse, and I don't know if that's a story that you're willing to share today as well.
Oh, I can.
Great.
So the nurse was, her name was Tanya. I was I had very bad experiences with mental hospitals. Every single time, it felt like they just discarded my needs. It felt like they didn't know how to treat me because of my dual diagnoses. An example being when a depressed person says, I don't want to go to group today, then the usual response is to make them go to group anyways because that's avoidant behavior. But that wasn't my mental illness talking, that was my autism talking. I didn't want to go because I was overwhelmed. So when they try to treat one single mental illness, they often end up neglecting the other one. So I could feel a very vivid panic attack coming up. I was terrified. I knew something big was coming. So I went to a nurse and I told her something bad is going to happen. I need to be in the quiet room where I can't hurt myself. I need to just be somewhere away from everyone else, but where I could still be monitored. And I've asked this before in a couple other mental hospitals. They usually say no because that room is specifically reserved for patients who are violent and lashing out. But Tanya, she understood that I knew myself and that I knew my own body. So she let me go into the quiet room. And I did have that breakdown. It was really, really intense. But I managed to do a lot of damage control because I felt safe. I knew that I was protected. I knew that I was being watched. And that really meant something to me because even though it seems kind of small and mundane, the fact that she listened was extremely important to me. Thanks.
Victoria, thank you so much for sharing that story as well. And both stories, really, I know that they were both difficult situations for you. And I just think that they are great illustrations of all of the words that people used earlier to describe what was important in relationships for them, especially the piece that I think was tied through both of your stories, Victoria, was that trust and safety. And the last thing that you just said that I think is critical to emphasize is that we listen to the people that we support, right? So thank you again, Victoria. We appreciate you being here and always showing up. So now I'm going to turn it over to our next two presenters, Nancy Thaler and Kelly Miller.
Hi, this is Nancy and Kelly. Are you there?
Hi, I'm here as well.
Great, good. I think you take the first slide, right? Or do I? I think I do. That's right. Yes, I do. So, I'm going to tell you about a project that the Link Center's been engaged in for the last year and going into our second year. And this project is called Supporting Children with Disabilities Who Have Mental Health Needs. And it's funded by the federal government, by the Department of Human Services and SAMHSA and the Administration for Community Living. And what our job was to focus on children who have really significant needs. People will use the term complex needs. These are young children, young adults mostly, sometimes young, but very young, but mostly in the teenage years, who are in lots of foster homes, lots of different residential facilities. They experience seclusion and restraint, and their behavior is problematic, and people don't know what to do. And our job was to figure out who those children are, what makes them complex, and what we could do to give people advice on how to support children who have complex mental health needs. We've done a lot in the last year, lots of research and publications. We've worked with lots of national organizations. We've had focus groups. We've done interview with subject matter experts. We had a big event, a big get together in Washington to come to understand, learn, and find a way to communicate who are the kids and what do they need. And we're working on our final report that we will then disseminate. So the next slide. So we thought it would be useful to share from that whole year's worth of work and talking to so many people. What did we learn? What did we learn that's important to children and young adults having a good life? And the very first thing that came across, almost no matter who we talked to or what we read, was that being with people that the child likes, that we like, being with somebody we like and who's important to us is the single most important thing in our lives. Without that, it's hard for anything else to work. Relationships with someone that you can, as everybody said in the chat, trust, that you can be yourself with, that you know loves you, that won't judge you and respects you. So it just reinforces what you've all said and what we know to be true, and is often the very thing that is missing in the lives of children. Another thing is doing things every day that make us feel good at home and in the community. Getting to do, not only be with people, but if I like to hike, hiking. If somebody likes to bake, getting to bake. If somebody likes to go to a diner to have dinner twice a week, then going to the diner. But doing those things that just make us feel good. The third thing, outside of who we're with and what we do every day, is that families and people who help, like direct care staff and therapists, it's very important that they understand who we are and what we need. And sometimes that takes coaching and training and having team meetings to stay on top of what somebody needs and how to meet their needs, figuring out together how to meet that person's needs. Another thing we discovered, the fourth thing we discovered, it's very, very useful to learn how the brain works. And the reason for that is that's where our feelings are. That's the brain takes in what we hear, how people are toward us. The brain also decides how we're going to respond to other people. Are we going to respond with anger, or are we going to respond with a smile? So understanding how the brain works is very useful for everybody, for individuals, for all of us, for young kids, as well as the family members and people who care for them. And the last thing we learned is being healthy is very important. So being healthy, eating the right foods, getting some exercise, being outside, and also finding out if there's any discomfort or pain. Sometimes people have pain or they have discomfort, but they're not in their brain. They don't really realize it. Either that or they can't communicate it. So things like toothaches, headaches, sinus pain, bad allergies, all these things need to be known and addressed so that individual people can have a good life. But going back to the first point, it begins with really having people you trust, people who love you, people that you love, and who know who you are and what you need. So those are the things that we've learned, and it really lends to why this group discussion about relationships, so we can dig a little deeper into that. And then the next slide. Now, Kelly.
All right, thank you, Nancy. Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about why relationships are important. Victoria touched on this, and let's continue some information and discussion about that. So next slide. It's really important, if we're going to talk about relationships, to also acknowledge loneliness. Loneliness is a feeling of being alone or disconnected from other people. And even a person with a lot of friends can still feel lonely. Loneliness can affect our health and well-being. And feeling lonely is a normal emotion, right? At times we all feel a little lonely or lonesome, but it's when that feeling is persistent or you're feeling lonely, quite a bit of the time when health can be impacted. Sometimes there are things that make it harder for us to connect with others and lead to feelings of loneliness. Things like if we don't feel well physically or mentally, if we want to go somewhere, but that place isn't inclusive or accommodating, not having transportation or not having assistive technology that we might need to communicate, or experiencing a language barrier. So sometimes we can't control some of those factors. The interesting thing about loneliness is there's some research out there that actually shows it can have the same long-term health effects as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So a higher risk for things like stroke and heart disease. Another thing about loneliness is, how it impacts your health is it can become this sort of cycle of maybe someone's depressed and so they feel lonely, or maybe they're lonely and so they feel depressed, which might lead to isolating from other people and might lead to just not being as invested as we need to be in taking care of ourselves, and possibly also not letting our caretakers help us or take care of us. Next slide. Again, this is just revisiting some of those effects of loneliness. Um, Poor social relationships is linked to, as I mentioned, risk of stroke and heart disease. Uh, Isolation or loneliness increases our risk also for anxiety and dementia as we get older. Um, and I'm thinking about, I have a good friend actually who is going through a difficult time being estranged from her family, and she is very lonely, very depressed, and it is impacting her health. Things like she's losing her hair, she's having issues with her teeth, she's not getting good nutrition, so she's not feeling well. And you can see sort of how this cycle of feeling lonely, feeling depressed, and she doesn't want to seek any medical care because she just doesn't have the energy to do that. So she's not getting her medical needs met. And you can see how this domino effect can happen for people. And you could get to a place of being just really unhealthy physically and emotionally if loneliness is pervasive in your life. Next slide. So what can we do to negate some of these impacts of loneliness? Well, there is good news. Having safe, supportive, nurturing relationships is one way to negate some of those impacts of loneliness. So, and research has shown us that for kids, even just having one person, one adult who they can identify as a safe, supportive, nurturing person can make a huge difference. For adolescents, having one person has proven to keep kids from getting into trouble, particularly teenagers who maybe have experienced adverse childhood experiences or difficult times during their childhood. And research is telling us too that having at least one person that's a safe, supportive, nurturing adult is enough to really help kids get through very difficult and challenging situations. That one factor of having that one go-to person can make a huge difference. Next slide. And Victoria mentioned that we all have different needs for relationships and connections. So this just kind of illustrates some different types of connections that we all might need. So feeling connected with ourselves and knowing what we need and how to ask for what we need. Intimate relationships, which might not mean physical intimacy, but meaning that you have a confidant or a close relationship with maybe a sibling or a parent or a caregiver. Relational refers to like friendships and social connections, and collective refers to feeling like part of a community, feeling a sense of belonging to something a little larger than yourself. So this could also include being part of a spiritual or faith-based community. Next slide. And of course, we all know that different relationships are important to us at different stages in life. When, I was a teenager, I had major FOMO, or fear of missing out. I didn't want to miss a party or a concert or a date or a movie. Now I am and have not been a teenager in quite some time, and I really don't have that sense of FOMO anymore. As I've gotten older, and I think that this is probably common for many people, as we age, we maybe have less relationships, but they are more meaningful. They're more intense. They're with people we connect with a little bit more. It's not necessarily a lack of relationships that could make a person feel lonely, but it would be a lack of meaningful relationships that could lead to loneliness. The interesting thing about connections and friendships too is that uh, having good friendships improves the child's self-esteem. Having good self-esteem improves the quality of friendships. So that's a really nice circle to think of. Kids with better self-esteem choose better peers. They're less likely to be bullied or victimized by other kids. So thinking about that sort of circle of like having close friends boosts self-esteem. Having good self-esteem boosts the quality of your relationships. If you'd be interested in putting your thoughts about that in the chat, we'd love to hear, why do you think that might be? Why is self-esteem a factor when it comes to building good friendships and healthy relationships? What might your thoughts be in that? In one of our other sessions, someone had said that when you have self-esteem, you're more comfortable setting boundaries. And I thought that was really so well put, so well said, right? Because if you do have good self-esteem, you do feel comfortable setting boundaries, and you're not going to stay or participate in a relationship or a friendship where someone is not nice to you. And yes, Christina says less likely to be peer pressured into negative things. Absolutely, because that self-esteem gives the strength to say no, no, thank you. More resilient. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely can kind of bounce back from some of those things. Like Victoria mentioned, it can take some time to get through and kind of heal hurt feelings after a relationship. There are some studies out there that show that even after a breakup for up to 1 year, that impacts how a person thinks about their self-esteem in terms of relationships. So even a year after our relationship ends, we're still having these residual feelings of self-esteem and self-worth, and those factor into the relationships that we choose to engage in or not. So absolutely, resiliency is so important. If you're so desperate for friends and have low self-esteem, you may tolerate being treated in unhealthy ways. Yep. Yep. And then you're maybe putting that circle in reverse, which is not good. You have low self-esteem, choosing unhealthy peers, which is not going to do anything for your self-esteem, right? It's maybe going to tank it even further, and then you get stuck in this pattern of making poor choices when it comes to who you want to spend your time with and share your life with. So thank you for putting some thoughts into the chat about this piece. Let's go next slide. So this is sort of interesting and kind of speaks to what Victoria mentioned too about the good outweighing the bad. So the experiences we have in relationships are cumulative, just like life. And sometimes we can't always control the good things or the bad things that happen to us. And to a certain extent, we can control how we perceive them, but that's much easier said than done, right? So kids and adolescents with low self-esteem are likely to experience less social support and more negative relationship experiences over time, just what we've been saying. So this really emphasizes the importance of some timely support and timely conversations to interrupt this cycle. Interestingly, for many people, self-esteem does gradually improve as we grow up and become adults. So, not for everyone, but for many people, that process is kind of on autopilot through trial and error of life experiences. Our self-esteem does grow and expand just as we do too. So these diagrams, the pictures here sort of show that relationships are kind of like a teeter-totter, and so is child development. So as we're developing, the negative experiences can kind of weigh down the teeter-totter one way. Positive experiences can kind of help to negate some of that and bring it back to center. It's kind of a tipping of the scales, right? Experiences that result in things like toxic stress, things like being exposed to chronic violence or poverty or maltreatment. Those pile on the negative side of the scale. Positive influences that can help make significant stress tolerable, such as supportive relationships, skill building opportunities, self-efficacy, and practicing dealing with challenges, can tip the scale the other way. So the interesting thing too is about this fulcrum in the middle, that triangle that the scales or the teeter-totter are balanced on. That represents us as an individual, what we bring to the situation. So how how well I can tolerate stress, how much resiliency do I have? What is my self-esteem level? So that fulcrum isn't in a fixed position, because if someone is coaching me and supporting me to improve my self-esteem, I can shift that fulcrum. And all of a sudden, all that negative stuff on the scale is a little harder to lift, right? If we move that fulcrum, then that helps the positive stuff really swing up into the air and outweigh the negative. So I think that really speaks to the importance of having a safe, supported, stable, nurturing relationship with someone, at least one person. We know even just one relationship like that is really beneficial for kids. So I think this just stresses the importance of thinking about those connections in terms of really helping with development and self-esteem, and thinking about just having conversations with children about how their relationships are going to help move that fulcrum, help them balance all these things out. Next slide. So what can we do as supporters? Next slide. So how do you show up as a person who looks like a safe, secure, stable, nurturing individual for someone? This is feedback that we heard from the steering committee. And some people shared that during their childhoods, they experienced neglect or abuse and bullying, and that they still carry that with them to this day, and that it had a great impact on them in their childhood. And so a lot of the things they said absolutely make sense and probably aren't going to be hugely surprising to you. But in order to create a safe, secure, nurturing relationship, things like being genuine and authentic and sincere, listening, involving the individual in choices that impact their life, taking an interest in checking in with people about the things that they are interested in and passionate about. Being consistent also came up as being very important, because there were situations where maybe an adult would pay some attention to someone, and then, kind of look them over for a time and then come back and say, oh yeah, how have you been? So that inconsistency led to this feeling of like not knowing when someone is sincere or authentic and not wanting to maybe trust people. So that consistency was mentioned as being very important, and helping to amplify voice. I might not need you to be my voice, but maybe I need you to help amplify my voice, and balancing out advocacy and self-determination. So having conversations about needs and how to get those needs met. All of these things just lead to the creation of, really secure, trustful relationships that reflect all the other adjectives that you put in the chat too, showing empathy as well. Next slide. What can we do to support relational or social connections? Again, these are probably not, there's no rocket science here on this slide. Things like building routines building into the routine, checking in with friends and family. Sometimes for kids who are maybe not able to be living with their family, that might be overlooked. So kids as Nancy mentioned, some of our work has explored the needs of kids in foster care and residential settings. And that is something that we think is often missing, is there's just no thought of even how do we routinely have you tend to your relationships with your family and continue to feel connected. Finding peers with similar interests, balancing screen time and in-person interactions. I think that in this day and age applies to most of us to one degree or another. Modeling good friendship skills, checking in about relationships and dynamics, and having conversations about how relationships are going, and doing other things in terms of like, we would love to see programs be able to help kids not have to leave their services in an abrupt way, because a lot of times the quality of those relationships with support staff and helping professionals sets the context for other supportive relationships down the road. Next slide. And in terms of what can we do to help people create collective connections where they feel, part of something larger, recognizing the strength of found family is something that we heard from the steering committee members, and that found family can be just as healing and supportive as biological family. Recognizing a strength in family within the disability community, where care for one another flows both directions. Exploring new hobbies and interests, exploring areas of talent to see if there are groups to connect with around those topics, helping someone scope out a new place to make sure that it is accessible and that they have the accommodations that might be needed in order for the person to be there and engage. And exploring spiritual or faith-based interests can also be something to do to look at those collective connections. Next slide. I will turn it back to Nancy to wrap us up, and then we'll turn it over to Becky and Jean to do an activity.
So I'm going to talk about just this one slide about power and how power gets used. We don't talk about power a lot in relationships, whether it's family or friends or a teacher, but power is a big factor in how people relate to each other. Wanting to be in charge, wanting to tell people what to do, think you know better than everybody else. I mean, there are lots of ways we exercise our power over other people. But what's important for us all to understand is that we have the power first, and that we can use that power to either make people feel good about themselves and feel like they want to be involved in the world, or we can use that power to make people feel really bad about themselves, and be depressed and terribly sad. We have the power to affect how people feel, but we have to be aware of it, mindful of it, and in control of it. So on the left of this slide is like one of the worst ways people use power: making fun of somebody, humiliating them, teasing them. That's using power over another person to make them feel bad and make them feel lonely. Another way we use power is when we don't use it, when we ignore somebody, when we see they might need help and we could do something, but we just choose not to, we don't feel like it. That's not deciding not to use our power in any way whatsoever. But on the right side is an example of using your power to change somebody's life. And it's not using power to make them feel better. You can't say, well, I think you should go to the zoo and you'll feel a lot better if you do that. Or I think you should eat this and your blood sugar won't be low. And I think you should. And I think you should. And telling people what to do. This is a picture of sitting with somebody and listening to them, hearing them out so they feel like somebody understands them and they're valued. And maybe some ideas will come up. Maybe things will come up about how you might be able to help. I mean, they might say, would you mind driving me to the park and going for a walk with me? But you're using your power, keeping your power in check, managing your power and your strength to focus on what that other person needs and how to make them feel okay. Oftentimes, when caregivers or any of us are under a lot of stress and we're pressed for time, we forget to do this. We want to take a shortcut. The kids are getting ready for school. Just tell them to stop crying and get on the bus. Use power to do that. How are they going to be when they get off the bus and go to school, right? So knowing that we have power, thinking about how we use it is a practice that we have to get into all of the time. And also knowing that when we're under stress or we're not feeling bad, we might not use our power very good with other people. So we should be thoughtful about that. So using power to make other people feel good is a tool that we have, a skill that we have, and a responsibility that we have. And that is my slide, and I think we can go on. Great.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jean Farr, and my colleague Becky and I are going to walk us through this this exercise. Boy, I have been so moved and inspired by all of the comments that just they're so meaningful to everyone. So thank you, everyone who has shared thus far. Before I ask Becky to introduce herself, again, I'm Jean Farr. I am an older white woman with short dark hair, black glasses, and a kind of a striped gray sweater. And I'm one of the partners on this project and work for NAD, an association for people with IDD and co-occurring mental health conditions. Becky?
Thank you, Jean. Hi, everyone. I'm Becky Wolfkiel. I am the Executive Director of the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators and a proud Link Center partner. I am a middle-aged white woman with brown hair pulled back in a ponytail and a brown shirt on today. So I'll turn it back over to Jean.
Great. So what we're going to do in our exercise today is we will present a scenario that talks about relationships and community connections. What we're hoping is that we hear from you about how you think about this topic through this discussion and related to the scenario that we are going to share with you. There are no wrong answers or ideas because we believe that you are the experts of your own experiences and we want to hear from you. The Link Center really wants to know what you're thinking so we can elevate the things that you bring up, things we may have not thought about, and so that we can take action as well. You can raise your hand to come off mute and even come on camera if you'd like. And also, if you want, you can write your thoughts in the chat or email us, and we will put your email in the chat for you. So we want to make it as easy as we can for you to share your insights with all of us so that we can continue to learn from everyone here. Also, please remember that if you need to step away or take a minute to, just kind of regulate yourself or take a few deep breaths, please do so. Please do so. So now what I'm going to do is read the case study and then ask a couple sort of discussion prompts or questions for you to think about. So, or for supporters in particular to think about. So here we go. The Welsleys live in rural Kansas and have been fostering children for about 5 years, since their own children are grown and out of the house. Recently, they were asked to foster a 12-year-old girl named Keisha. Keisha has lived in 9 different homes in 10 years. Her mother died of an overdose soon after Keisha was born, and her grandparents were unable to care for her due to their own medical needs. Keisha loves dogs. She loves to draw. Excuse me. And she says that art is her favorite class. At home, Keisha's withdrawn, preferring to stay in her room alone. At home and school, she becomes verbally and physically aggressive when she's asked to do something she doesn't want to do. She also takes things that are not hers from her classmates, from stores, from her foster parents, the Welsleys. Martha Wellesley, who works part-time at the school, and Gene Wellesley works also and has his own construction business. Their children and grandchildren visit once a week for family dinners. So when you think about this scenario, what are some opportunities that can capitalize that you can capitalize if you're thinking of how to support Keisha for her to build meaningful relationships with this family? So again, what are some opportunities that you can capitalize on for Keisha to build meaningful relationships within this scenario we've just presented?
Jean, one thing that I'm thinking about as people are entering into the chat or raising their hands is how much Keisha loves dogs. And I think that dogs, all animals really have a way of bringing people together and creating conversation. So if Keisha had access to a dog that she could walk with maybe the cousins and the grandchildren, that could be something positive for Keisha.
What a great idea, just having ways for her to have things in common with others and things that she can share as they build relationships. Another thing, oh, go ahead.
No, there's a comment in the chat, and it says, oops, and I just lost it. Sorry about that. Gene can take her to one of his construction sites on painting day and have her paint. I love that idea. And Gene may be artistic as well. If he's in the construction business, he probably has an artistic side. Potentially they could do some painting together at home.
And she could also maybe, or people can help her find out if anybody else in the family likes any kind of art.
Yes.
Maybe they could kind of do that together.
I wonder if there are opportunities at school for her to engage with her art teacher, or if there are, any after school programs that she could get involved in that are focused on art.
I'm seeing that Lisa mentioned to schedule times to build up her skills around her likes. Um, like go to the Humane Society, connect to lessons. Um,
Going to the Humane Society and just giving back in the community would be such a wonderful confidence building exercise too. We know how important self-esteem is for relationships.
Mhm.
Christina says, redirect her aggression into paint throwing on a large white canvas. That's a great, great idea.
Mhm.
And Stacy, sorry, Jean.
Oh, go ahead.
Stacy says she has so many losses in her life. Who is that one person that she connects with right now, and how can you encourage that relationship as a space to build trust and safety for future relationships?
That's a perfect segue into the second part of our prompt here is how to help Keisha build meaningful relationships. And I think we identified a couple things, and I know that there are others, but connecting others with things that they both enjoy, could be animals, could be art, but finding commonalities to build those connections.
And I'm not sure how old the children and grandchildren are that are visiting for family dinners, but those really feel like an opportune time to engage Keisha with some of these activities that she enjoys.
Christina mentions inviting her bio grandparents to family
Mhm.
dinners if her foster family is comfortable with that.
And Kelly says maybe she could teach the family how to do an art project, put her in the role of expert for a bit. Back to that self-confidence. Really, that's a great one, Kelly.
And earlier, someone mentioned having Jean take her to his business, and that would be. I've thought of that a couple times since it was mentioned because it would give her one-on-one time. It would expose her to activities and a business sort of maybe that she wouldn't know about. But I also wonder about um, the the other foster parent also taking her to school and
Mm,
maybe having a special day.
yeah, great points. Stacy says, what is her neighborhood like? Is there an opportunity for you to support her to build a dog walking business? I love this idea. Getting
Yeah.
paid to be around dogs and work on her skills to build relationships with her neighbors. Again, it puts her in that position of power that Nancy was talking about
Mhm.
earlier.
And building on that, I see Kelly mentioned that sometimes in her work, she would help children make life books. Perhaps she could create a book with pages about people who have been important to her and why.
Mhm.
That's a wonderful idea in terms of bringing forth the things that are meaningful to her in her heart and from a connection perspective, but also give her an opportunity to shine through her art skills. And then being able to share that would again um, have her have a way to deepen connections and to be in a position of power and be able to operate in that particular moment with strong self-esteem and engagement.
Mm. Such a great idea. I think too, related to art, she could draw dogs and she could draw pets. I know my kids always love to draw our pets at home. And so maybe, she could combine her love of art and dogs and create a portfolio of drawings.
Mm-hmm. I noted that Lisa also said to include the grandchildren in outings around the art and or dogs, further building those bonds.
I think the great thing about art too is that it's so varied. So, usually there's something you could find, whether it be painting or building, that, you can get a consensus of interest around.
Mm-hmm. Janet noted that perhaps she could get a therapist who has a therapy dog.
Absolutely. That's great idea. And Stacy says peers are so important. Is there an art club at school, or does she have a trusting relationship with her art teacher who could help nurture peer connections? I think it would be wonderful if Martha or Jean could engage with the art teacher and see what opportunities might be available outside of the classroom in that way.
And maybe they could encourage hanging some of her art, putting it, having it visible in the home.
Yes. Yes, that's right. I like this theme that you're coming up with, Jean, of really allowing her art to shine. I think that really is so important.
And maybe also fostering discussions around, the things she loves about her dogs, or, kind of being able to have prompts in case the conversation at dinner gets funny or goes sideways, to be able to kind of be ready to invite her into the family life, in
Yes.
whatever ways possible. What a bunch of wonderful, wonderful contributions here.
Lisa makes a good suggestion of creating a focused space in the home where she can explore her art and painting. I think in addition to someone's bedroom, it is wonderful sort of on the main level or sort of near the kitchen or the family room where the action's happening and people are, just for her to have her own dedicated space where she can focus on what she loves and is still around people is a really wonderful idea.
Yes. And Nancy noted, above all, identify the one or two people she trusts the most who make her feel loved, and make sure she's with them as much as possible, and that those people are involved in decisions about her life. Absolutely.
Yes, I think we hear over and over that connection is what is most important often for mental health needs. So I think that is an important focus.
Yeah, it
Janet,
really, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to note Janet's comment that on a less positive note, how do you make sure, since she's physically aggressive sometimes, that the grandchildren are safe? I know I do think it's certainly important that I think you noted that before, Jean, having some of these strategies in place to help if you can tell she's starting to get worked up or uncomfortable. How do we use these things that she loves and pivot to try to help get her regulated again?
And Nancy goes on to say, making sure she's supported through trauma-informed approaches.
Yes.
Yeah. These are wonderful, wonderful contributions, wonderful comments, considerations. Is there, give another, 30 seconds here in case anyone wants to make another statement before we close out here.
Well, I think we've received some really important and interesting ideas, and appreciate everyone's contributions and helping us think through some strategies for Keisha. This is the third session, and I appreciated we have some new ideas. It's really interesting to hear the various responses from the group. So I think with that, Jean, unless you have anything else, we'll turn it over to Carly for some closing
Yeah.
remarks.
I think well, I have one more chat that just came in from Stacy to everyone, reminding us that a tool developed by the Link Center is one that, here's a tool developed by the Link Center that can support Keisha to understand and help herself and help others help her manage trauma experiences. And it is posted here. So if any of you want to check that out, it's here on the link, and of course will be available and is already available on the Link Center under resources, under the topic of trauma. So be sure to check that out. And again, as Becky noted, thank you all for your wonderful contributions. And I would like to turn it over to our colleague, Carly Winnie, to move toward the closing of our session.
Thank you, Jean and Becky. So my name is Carly Winnie. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at NAD. I am a middle-aged white woman with graying hair that is up at the moment, and I'm wearing a blue sweater. So thank you all for being here today and for the great discussion. Please continue to add to the chat. What are your go-to resources, training, websites, and where you get information and support that will help us develop the materials and really inform us about where you go for information about regulating and coping skills. Next slide. Here is the schedule of past and upcoming shared learning groups. You can find recordings, transcripts, and material from past events on the Link Center's website. You can find and register for upcoming shared learning groups on the website as well. The next topic will be health and well-being, and that will take place in January. Next slide, please. You can visit the Link Center's website at any time. The address and link are here on the screen, and we'll also drop it in the chat as well. You can also email the Link Center if you have any questions or suggestions. Next slide, please. We do have a quick evaluation that we hope you will complete for us. On the screen is a QR code that you can scan with your phone, and we'll also put the link in the chat as well. It will pop up when we close today, and will also be sent out to everyone in an email. Your feedback on the evaluation really helps us make improvements and adjustments for future webinars and products. Thank you again for participating today. A special thank you to our colleagues, Victoria, Kelly, and Nancy. We'd like to thank our steering committee, as always, for sharing their thoughts and experiences that are invaluable on these shared learning groups. Thank you also to ACL and to all the partners for contributing to the preparation of and content for this meeting. That's it for today. I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.